Hi there, folks. Ever show you that my microphone is covered with a sock? When I first started doing these videos, it was windy. It was a windy day, and I was getting all sorts of noise, so I covered it with a sock, and I've just kept the sock on ever since. It seems to help reduce some of the wind noise. Anyway, I watched a Netflix show, and I'm going to review it. I only watched the first episode. I don't know if people in the comments section are going to go crazy because you can't review the show until you've watched every episode or something like that. The show is called Surviving Death, and it is based on a book by Leslie Kean. Let me go check. I was right. The author is Leslie Kean, and she is the author of a book called UFOs, and I forget the subtitle, that I read a few years ago, and I thought it was one of the best books about UFOs I'd read. I've since seen some people kind of debunking it, but what she tried to do with the UFO book is take only the most reasonably accurate sort of cases, the ones that had really good documentation from people who were, knew what they were looking at and so forth and so on, and it was pretty good. And then I heard that she was doing this Surviving Death book as a follow-up, and I'm like, oh well. Anyway, so I didn't buy the book. But I watched episode 1 of the TV series, and the first part of the episode I thought was pretty interesting. It was about a woman who apparently she was on some rapids doing this kind of kayaking stuff, and she had an accident where she went over a waterfall and stuff, and she was underwater for something like 30 minutes. So she was like as dead as you can be, and then came back to life. Somehow got revived. They don't explain physiologically how you could be underwater for 30 minutes and still survive. But anyway, she has an interesting account of what she experienced in the what do they call it? The near-death experience, the sort of post-death world. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to love reading books about that, and I remember there was a movie out. I can remember going. I don't know what it was called, but I remember going to the theater in Wadsworth, Ohio, and watching this movie about life after death. Can't remember what that was called. Probably one of these exploitation movies they came out with in the late 70s, a lot of. So this was real interesting to me, and I'd always been interested in the whole idea of life after death, because, it was one of these things I was interested in because of the, all the regular reasons, the fear of death and all the other stuff that goes along with it. So, I read about this stuff, and the versions of life after death that I kind of came in contact with as a child and a teenager in Wadsworth, Ohio, and in Nairobi, Kenya, were this kind of Christian versions that weren't very well developed, and it was impossible for me to believe in it, because the problem for me was I could kind of get my head around going, okay, well, maybe there's a God, maybe there's a heaven, maybe there's a hell, maybe life after death happens. Even when I said, okay, I'll accept all of that, whenever they talked about the mechanisms for which life after death follows, it was crazy. There was heaven and there was hell, and if you were good enough you got into heaven, and if you were bad you went into hell, but the tipping point seemed to be like one sin over the line and you were sent to hell for eternity, which didn't make any sense. And why does God sort of test you as put earth as your test spot, and why according to some people as long as you accepted Jesus Christ into your life, no matter what you did, you get to go to heaven. So like even these terrible people went to heaven, and then there were some people who never had a chance to accept Jesus Christ into their life because they never heard of Jesus Christ, so and I had experience with this, living in Africa and places like that. Of course, Kenya was a very Christian country, but there were people out in the rural areas, I'm sure, who'd never heard of Jesus, and so it just was very hard for me to accept. So when I came to be a teenager and came across the Hare Krishnas and their version of reincarnation, I would go, okay, well, that makes a little more sense. At least God gives you a couple of chances to get it right, and maybe I can believe that. But the whole life after death thing was not easy for me to accept. But I thought I'd talk a little bit, and I talk about this probably too much, do too many videos and books and things about this, about Dogen's view of life after death, and I think it's interesting, so I hope you'll bear with with me to listen to this again, if you've listened to it before, because I'll try to say something different. In his essay, Mind Here and Now is Buddha, here's Dogen describes this Indian belief that predates Buddhism, and he says that this belief is that within our material bodies there is a spiritual intelligence that distinguishes between pain and pleasure, naturally senses cold and warmth, and recognizes discomfort and irritation. This spiritual intelligence always remains unchanging. This spiritual intelligence is all around, pervading all souls, common and sacred, without distinction. The spiritual intelligence is clearly recognizable, peaceful, and eternal. Though the physical form may be broken, the spiritual intelligence departs unbroken, just as when a house burns down in a fire, the master of the house leaves. Now that is describing an old Indian belief, not a Buddhist belief. But Dogen is saying that sometimes this is confused with what the Buddhists believe. And by way of kind of refuting this, he quotes a Master Echu who says, "When I examine people who espouse this idea, they do not know the false from the true. They delude and disturb recent students. How painful it is that our religion is being lost." And elsewhere in his writings, particularly in Genjo Koan, he says things like, "Firewood after becoming ash does not again become firewood. Similarly, human beings after death do not live again." So he's pretty equivocal there. But then he's got some other places where he says something different, and the most sort of on-the-nose one, let's say, comes in this essay called Doshin, which is mind of the way, will to the truth, the bodhicitta, the mind that seeks the true way of Buddhist philosophy and practice. And let's see, I cut down this quote so you could better understand this the life after death stuff, because there's a lot more to this quote than the life after death stuff, so I kind of skipped around. But putting all the life after death stuff together, you get, "Between abandoning this life and being born in a next life, in which period there is said to be a middle existence whose life is 7 days, even during that period we should intend to chant the three treasures without ever lulling the voice." So that's the point he's making, is we should chant the three treasures. But by the way, he also mentions all this life after death stuff. "After 7 days, we are said to die in the middle existence, and then to receive another body in the middle existence for 7 days, for another 7 days, I guess. At the longest, this body lasts 7 days. At this time we can see and hear anything without restriction, as if with the supernatural eye. When, having passed out of middle existence, we are drawing close to a father and a mother, we should steel ourselves, even when, due to the presence of right wisdom, we are in the womb storehouse world that will commit us to the womb of our mother in the next life, we should chant the three treasures." So the point he's making here is how important it is to chant reverence to the three treasures, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and not really to say, "Hey kids, here's what happens after you die, listen to this." He seems to assume that his listeners already believe this and are already kind of steeped in this, and he's just kind of going over it again, who knows why. That's as close as you get to a description of life after death in Dogen. And as I said, it is not a section of his writing in which he's saying, "Hey, here's what happens after you die, let's go, number 1, number 2, number 3. He's making this point about how important it is to chant the three treasures, and by the way of making this point, he's telling about life after death and how you should chant them even in the womb storehouse world and all this stuff. So it seems clear to me that Dogen had some sort of belief in what we would call reincarnation. We would probably class that belief in, under the subcategory of reincarnation. Now here is a modern contemporary Buddhist master, Shohaku Okumura, author of a lot of books that I like a lot, and I'm not sure what book this is in. I believe this is in one of his books, but I found it online in an essay, and if I can find it again, I'll put a link below, but if I can't find it, you won't find a link. So there you go. He says, "I don't believe in rebirth, and yet I don't negate it. There is no basis to believe or negate it. What I can say for sure is, I don't know. The important thing for me is to practice in this lifetime as the Buddha instructed in the Dhammapada, to refrain from anything bad and practice everything good, purify your mind. This is the teaching of the 7 Buddhas. If there is rebirth, it is all right. I will try to practice in the same manner. If there is no rebirth, I don't need to do anything after my death." Pretty practical. So I don't need to think about it in that case. Even if I don't believe rebirth as a person, I don't negate the principle of cause and effect. What I am doing now will have a result even after my death. And then later on he says, this is how I answered the question about rebirth until recently. But after I became 50, and he's 52 when he's saying this, and that's younger than I am now, believe it or not, I found that I have a wish to live the next life, simply because my life seems too short a span to fully understand the true meaning of Buddha's, Dogen's, and other teachers' words. I wish to be reborn as a Buddhist again and continue to work on it. I think this is because I am aging and have found my limitations. Probably the belief in the Bodhisattva's ceaseless practice life after life was originated in this awakening to the limitations of our personal lives. And he also says in the same essay that Buddhism does have this kind of dichotomy where they say there is no self, there's no permanent immutable self, there's no soul inside your body that could get reincarnated, but they believe in reincarnation. Now, one explanation that's often used, and I think Shohaku Okumura's teacher, Uchiyama Roshi, says this in one of his books, but don't quote me, but I think it was in Uchiyama Roshi's books or one of them. It's like a candle with a flame, and you have this flame on this candle, and you use this candle to light the other candle and blow out the first one. Is it the same flame, or is it another flame? That's kind of how reincarnation works, rebirth works in Buddhism. Whether you believe it or not is kind of up to you. It's not really that important. I know that there are some sects of Buddhism which think it's really, really, really important to believe in rebirth. And some people say that there is no Buddhism at all if you don't believe in rebirth. If you don't believe in reincarnation, rebirth, another life after this one, then there's everything in Buddhism is completely negated. Well, I don't believe that, and I don't think most of us in the Zen tradition believe that. Certainly Shohaku Okumura, who writes a lot about the Zen tradition and has practiced it for a long, long time, doesn't believe that you have to believe in rebirth in order to understand Buddhism and to follow the Buddhist path. The show is interesting enough, the Surviving Death show is interesting enough that I plan to watch at least the next episode, and if that one works for me, I'll watch some more. The episode itself, just to get back to my review of it, I thought the first half was real interesting with this lady who was dead for 30 minutes and stuff. And her story was kind of like, wonder what the deal is with that. But then they went into another story about another woman who had a near-death experience that seemed kind of hokey to me, And that one I was like, oh, it looks like this woman is really trying to prove a point, that something, trying to promote herself as a psychic or something. I couldn't really discern what the deal was there, but there seemed to be some kind of ulterior motive in her story, and it went on for a long, long time, and so the episode was sort of like, after the first half of being really interesting, then the second half was kind of like, oh, come on, get on with this, let's talk to somebody else. Anyway, we'll see what the next few episodes are like, and I don't know if I'll revisit it or not. But if you want me to have money to spend on my Netflix subscription, actually I'm using my girlfriend's Netflix subscription. Anyway, but I do have a Hulu subscription. So you can send me money to get that. I thank you very much for sending it to the donation address you're seeing below. If you're having financial trouble, don't donate to me. I mean, like I say, I can afford a Hulu subscription, so I'm not, dying out here. But the reason I'm not dying out here is because people continue to contribute, and I have zero other source of income. Well, like I said last time, I got $133 in book royalties the other week, so I got that coming in. But my main source of income really is your donations. And I really thank you for your continued support. Have a good time all the time. See you later. See you in the next life. Bye.